So box.
Hi, I'm Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to Box F1 Pod. Welcome to the Austin Grand Prix episode. Today we're chatting everything that happened at the Austin Grand Prix. And boy, did our first leg of the triple header give us content to dissect. Not only do we have some outstanding drama from the random fall break that the FIA enforced upon us, we also had plenty of on and off-track drama this weekend. Also, I was going to cook. I was actually not... I didn't know what to make for Austin because America always stumps me and I just don't know what to make. And I was going to just go with my previous experience of Austin, which was soup's basic. I'm not going to make barbecue, by the way, but it was just like a super basic experience. And I had my favorite meal there, which was Caesar salad, French fries, and an espresso martini. But then I realized I didn't have lettuce or anchovies or fries. So I've left with the espresso martini, but I'm saving up all my cooking stuff for next week when we head to Mexico City and then Brazil. That's where all the good food will get started anyway. So pour yourself a drink or just get your regular coffee, whatever time you're listening to this. And there goes the Ferrari. Through goes the Ferrari. And let's kick things off with the digital warm-up. Lap 1. Daniel Ricciardo. Okay, so the last episode I recorded, Singapore, I recorded literally like an hour and a half after the race ended, which I like for efficiency, but I usually don't like recording because I miss stuff, and I missed a big one. I missed all the tributes to Daniel. I missed the basic admission that was his last race. I missed the tears. I missed all the stuff. So basically, rewinding back to that race, if you guys remember, throughout the race, there was nothing indicating, I mean, there were rumors, but there was nothing for sure that this was Daniel's last race. And then in the media pen, although I'm not entirely sure why the fuck they made him go into the media pen when they knew he was like done, he was like welling up with tears when he was asked why he stayed in his cockpit for so long. And he said something like along the lines of like he'd spent so much of his life in his in the cockpit and he just wanted to relish his last moments in there. And it was just like, it was so sad. It was like, it's definitely sadder than McLaren because I think everyone still had hope that he'd somehow make his way back to the grid. This feels so final. It's just really sad. Then we saw Daniel entering the V-Carb hospitality as the whole team lined up outside with like, you know, like the champions, like entrance or whatever it is, like where they put their hands up and like wave him in. And that was really wholesome and made me tear up. And then Ted Kravitz, who generally I don't agree with or particularly enjoy, no offense to Ted, gave the most heartfelt farewell to Daniel on Sky. It was like, thank you for your smile. Thank you for the laughs. Thank you for the horse. Just like all of this stuff. And it was just such a touching, it'll be linked, but it was just such a touching send off to Daniel. It just made me really sad that no one really had time to prepare for this. We also heard from Kim, the photographer. He stayed at the paddock until the last person left taking pictures, and the last person to leave was Daniel. There was a moment where Lando came into the hospitality, presumably for a private farewell. Wonder if Netflix filmed that. Netflix is gonna have a fucking ball this season. But anyway, then we heard nothing for like 4 days when V-Carb, F1, and Daniel shared that Daniel is exiting Formula One. The public outcry that followed was insane because V-Carb and F1 both posted like, thanks for the memes, bye. F1 did a little more. V-Carb like definitely just said like, thanks for the memes, and then like launched introducing Liam and excitedly promoting Liam. And none of this is obviously Liam's fault, but like this is such a good opportunity for him. Daniel's time was up, but that's not what we're discussing. It's not whether it was time for him to go or not. It's about how he went. Like, none of this is Liam's fault. Obviously, F1 is just following suit. But the way VCarb and Red Bull handled all this was actually terrible. Like, out of all the things they've ever done, I think this might be the most egregious to me, especially after they threw such a fit about the way Zach Brown treated him and how they like nursed him back to health, only to get rid of him in this way. I completely understand from a business decision, Daniel wasn't cutting it. I completely understand that they need to bring new talent in. I don't understand keeping it under wraps, not giving him a proper send-off, not giving everyone time to grieve, and not giving everyone time to prepare for it to be his last race. Like, I just don't get that part of it. And it's just mean for someone of his caliber, of his seniority, of someone who gave this much to the sport. To be treated in that way makes no sense. Also, he wasn't like that low in the championship. He wasn't high for sure. He was lower than Yuki, but not like that low. It wasn't like Alex and Logan difference, you know, like 6 races left. They could have easily just let him finish out the year with his dignity and his grace intact. Like, it's just like it wasn't worth it. I know they wanted to see what Liam could do in the car, and give him this opportunity to like show himself, which is fair. It was just mean. Like, I, in theory, understand it from a business perspective. I just don't think that giving Liam 6 races to show himself was worth it. That's just, but I'm not a business person, so what do I know? And for the record, this was his retirement. It's not like up under speculation. Will he come back? Although I have seen rumors like, oh, he's in talks for another team. He posted pictures. He went on a slight social media hiatus, but he did return and posted some photos. And one of the photos, he was wearing a hat that said, "I'm retiring. Having a good time is my job." So he's retired, I think. I think he's done. I just really wish he was able to leave with the dignity he deserves. But again, we all know that's not the last of Daniel Ricciardo that we're seeing. It would be a huge miss for the sport in general to not keep him around. They owe their popularity in North America to Daniel Ricciardo. Like, DTS is what it is because of Daniel. And if anyone in the F1 world doesn't capitalize on Daniel's reach, on Daniel's charisma, on Daniel's knowledge, on Daniel's expertise, then they're all insane. And even if the F1 world is not the world in which he continues to be in, he will be like snatched up by someone else. He has such a bright future ahead of him. It makes me sad. So when he finally posted, he wrote, "I've loved this sport my whole life. It's wild and wonderful, and it's been a journey. To the teams and individuals that have played their part, thank you. To the fans who love the sport sometimes more than me, thank you. It'll always have its highs and lows, but it's been fun, and truth be told, I wouldn't change it. Until the next adventure." Man, I thought I cried it all out a month ago. Clearly not. Sorry. Pierre, Lando, George, Scotty James, Nico Rosberg, the Buffalo Bills, Esteban Ocon, Fernando, Red Bull, VCarb, fuck Red Bull and VCarb though, Mercedes, Max, Lewis, Oscar, and more commented on his post. And then people made people made standalone posts for him. Pierre posted about him and congratulated him on his career with a picture of Daniel in Austin on a horse. Who else is going to miss him going, Pierre Gasly? George posted that it won't be the same without him. Lewis posted a farewell saying his life was just beginning. Yuki posted that it was a pleasure to be his teammate. And I will say his post was a little lackluster, but I think Yuki's just not big on posting. I really appreciated someone interviewed him and asked him what's the most important thing he's learned from Daniel. And he said the most important thing he's learned from Daniel is how to control his emotions and how to leave his emotions like outside. He was like, Daniel, no matter what happened on track, Daniel would come in with a smile on his face, really happy. No matter what was happening on track, he would still speak with everyone with respect and dignity and didn't let the adrenaline and the emotions of the moment get to him. And he was like, that was a really important lesson for me, and I hope to take that into the future. And I think that's just like really sweet, because I think that is Yuki's biggest flaw. And Daniel did return from his social media hiatus to post a Singapore dump, and it featured a helmet swap with Oscar, his fellow Aussie, and just generally some truly sweet behind the scenes content. And I just love him, and I hope he's okay. And I also can't wait to see what he does next, but honestly, fuck Red Bull and V-Carb. Anyways, too long didn't read. Daniel deserved way more, and I hope and pray his career in F1 continues in some capacity, because again, F1 owes their entire American fan base to Daniel Ricciardo and more. Like, at minimum, the American fan base. All right, lap 2. F1 news. So Red Bull had an illegal part in their car. It like raises and lowers the seat so it can impact the aerodynamics, and it's pretty much it can be used to change things without anyone noticing externally. It can be changed from the cockpit or by the engineers when they're like doing updates. There has been no evidence that they've used it in Park Firm or in any other place other than like outside of racing times, like to adjust things in the car, and that it was like left in there. That's a bit sus, but there's no evidence, and they've been asked to remove it. Zach Brown has obviously been leading the charge to punish them, which is a bit rich considering they had a exceptionally flexible rear wing that had to be changed just a few weeks prior. I also think it's hilarious because this horrible picture came out of Zach Brown and Christian Horner wearing matching pajamas in a private jet together, being like, we leave things on track or something along those lines. And it really made my blood boil, because like, what were they talking about? How to fuck over Daniel? Like, I always put Christian above Zach Brown, and Zach Brown they don't like each other very much, but I don't know why they were matching pajamas on a private jet. It really pissed me off. I didn't want to see it. I'm trying to erase it from my memory, but it did happen. And it's just funny that as soon as they get back on track, they are at each other's throats, and Zach Brown is like off with his head, seemingly super in alignment with Toto, but I saw Toto nowhere near the matching set situation. Just saying. In other news, Dr. Helmut Marko made comments about Lando. He said something along the lines of like thinking that Norris like we all know, Norris has mental weaknesses, and that he's heard about some of the rituals he needs to perform on race day. And obviously, people threw like a whole hissy fit. Leading the charge, as always, is Zach Brown and Andrea Stella, saying it's unacceptable for Dr. Helmut Marko to say these things, especially considering how much good Lando has done for mental health in this sport and in sport in general, and how it's been so brave of him to be vocal about his personal struggles. And all of that is true. And this isn't me defending Dr. Helmut Marko's stance on mental health, because let's be honest, he probably doesn't believe in it. He's too old, and just it's past the point of like him being able to accept it. But I truly don't think these comments were related to Lando's struggles with mental health and his openness about mental health and about like dealing with anxiety and like all of those things. I think he was truly saying that like he's not sure that Lando has the mental fortitude to go up against Max Verstappen, which is something that we've all said over the last few months. We've all questioned his ability to go through that. I think at one point I said that his childhood seems a little bit too happy to give him the resilience to deal with stuff like this. Every week someone questions it. It was questioned this week by Will Buxton quite aggressively on the post-race show. So like, just because people approach it with a bit more grace and tact than Dr. Helmut Marko, I truly don't think that's what he was referencing. Again, that's not a defense against Mark Helmut's stance on mental health, because again, I don't think he believes in it. Not that he said that, I just don't think he does. But yeah, my point is that like what he said was said incorrectly and poorly worded, but I really think he was just questioning his mental fortitude. And interestingly, I think Lando might be the closest aligned on that interpretation, because he said that there might have been some translation issues because his only pre-race ritual is to eat a chicken wrap. Actually, now I really want a chicken wrap. I might make a chicken wrap for dinner, like a chicken Caesar salad wrap. Even though I don't have romaine lettuce or anchovies. But I have a wrap, so... Anyway, in another piece of F1 news, James Vowles, for some strange reason, I assume he was prompted, said in an interview that Williams didn't need someone like Adrien Newey because it would just stress everyone out. He said Williams wasn't ready for someone like Adrien. He would have overwhelmed our team, and that could have had the opposite effect. He would have ended up frustrated, and I don't want to build an infrastructure that depends on one person. I thought this was absolutely hilarious because as if there was like a shot in hell that James Vowles could afford Adrien Newey. Like, Williams was never even an option for him. I almost guarantee it. Unless he was, I don't know the question that preceded this, but unless he was specifically asked, would you have wanted Adrien Newey on your team? Unless he just volunteered this information. And also even if he was asked, like, what would you do if Adrien, he could have just said, like, we couldn't afford him. Duh. We can't even afford a car for our second driver. All right, lap 3, off-duty F1. First of all, in a strange turn of events, Kamala Harris I believe she was on Howard Stern, and she went on a bit of a rant about how much she loves Formula One. And then Howard Stern was like, so this isn't just like a campaign thing. And she's like, please, this campaign is getting in my way of watching it. Like, I can't wake up at the right time. I am always doing stuff, which I thought was hilarious. Her favorite driver is Lewis, which was to be expected. But it does sound like her and her family are actively watching F1. And I think it's amazing that she is. Anyway, if anyone didn't catch, People magazine published an article called Sexiest Formula One Drivers. Meet the 15 racers who have our heart rates speeding. From Britain's Lewis Hamilton to Japan's Yuki Tsunoda, these 15 racers have our hearts going 100 miles per hour. First of all, they just cut out 5 people. They were just like, 5 of these, let's just do 15. There's only 20. Second of all, how are Lewis Hamilton, I understand, being in the subtitle of this article. Yuki Tsunoda is the second person they choose to call out. Not that I don't adore Yuki, but like, surely there's other people to call out here. I'm pretty sure this entire article was written by ChatGPT. I'm just putting this out there. It says it's credited to someone named Stephanie. Stephanie definitely used ChatGPT because half of this information is entirely inaccurate. Number 1 on this list is Lewis Hamilton. She basically gets it all right. The 39-year-old whose long race for Mercedes made headlines earlier this year when it was announced he'll be moving to Ferrari. Fair enough. I can understand Lewis making number 1 spot. Not just, he's super cute, but he's also very famous. So I can understand him taking the number 1 spot. Number 2 is Charles Leclerc. Arguably should be number 1, but he is number 2, and he should definitely be in the top 2. That's 100% sure. She describes him as a double-dimpled monegasque, and that he's a rising star. He's risen. The star hath risen. She said the 2023 season wasn't so grand for him and the Ferrari team, but 2024 promises to be better as he's slated to race at the Las Vegas Grand Prix in November. She does know he's also racing in all the other races, right? He has 2 wins so far, from Monaco and the second from Italian Grand Prix. She also doesn't mention the emotional weight both of those races carry, but that's fine. Number 3, George Russell. Pictured in the worst sweater imaginable. Like, it's just the most George sweater ever. It's so George, and I do love George. He's a handsome boy. But number three, standing at 6'1", I think helped. With hair coiffed by the gods. We all know there's hair that's definitely been coiffed by the gods on the grid. Not necessarily George Russell, although his hair is good. Of all the things to mention about George Russell, she mentions that he recently secured a W at the Austrian Grand Prix this past June and would have won another one, but was disqualified. Number 4, this is where she really starts to lose me. I wasn't fully bought in for the first top 3, but I'm definitely getting lost for number 4. Fernando Alonso. Not that he doesn't deserve to be on this list or to be this high up. It's more the description of Fernando Alonso that really concerns me. Fernando Alonso is the perfect definition of tall, dark, and handsome. And at 43 years old, the Spaniard is a veteran of the track. In case you forgot, Fernando is 5'7". So dark and handsome he may be. Tall? Not quite. This would be the prime time to mention that he's also a 2-time world champion. But guess not. Number 5 is Max Verstappen. Kelly has definitely added to his glow up. I adore Max. I'm one of Max's #1 fans, much to the concern of many people in my lives, but I adore Max. I love him. I respect him for everything he is. I did describe him as a melted Lego in his first couple years of F1. He's certainly come into his face. So I don't know if I put him in number 5 of the sexiest F1 drivers, but here he is. So racing is in the genes for Max Verstappen, whose father, Joe, spelled Joe, was also an F1 racer, while his mother, Sophie Kumpen, was a kart racer, and the racing prowess is showing. Verstappen is the reigning Formula One world champion, having won the title for 3 consecutive years, from 21 to 2023 for Red Bull Racing. In his personal life, Verstappen has been with his girlfriend, Kelly Piquet, since 2020. Also no mention of how he scored Kelly Piquet, which actually I think would add to his sex appeal, the fact that he stole the seat and the girl from Daniel. I think that adds to his sex appeal. His father, Joe, even if they had spelled it correctly and referred to him by his correct name, does not add to his sex appeal, doesn't need to be mentioned. There's a lot more things about Max Verstappen that could be mentioned here to up his sexiness. Joe Verstappen, not one of them. Number 6, Pierre Gasly. Fair, the riz in this man, I understand him being here. I do think some people should have been way ahead on this list, but Pierre Gasly being here, no questions asked, honestly. Apparently, according to his Instagram, it's easy to tell that what he cares about most is his girlfriend. Clearly she hasn't spent that much time on his Instagram because he has an excellent feed, and as much as he loves her, not sure she's #1. And apparently all he does when he's not racing is spending time with his boo traveling the world. Number 7 is Daniel Ricciardo, tragically low on this list. Gonna be honest. He is a household name. She got that correct. She got all of his information right. And then he returned to Red Bull, but was released in September 2024 in what many believe to be the end of his F1 racing career. Not entirely sure that she should have led with that, or that I don't know why that's the one piece of information she got right, like timely piece of information, but whatever. She does mention his girlfriend, Heidi Berger, who were first linked in 2021, but didn't confirm their relationship until August 2022. Love that she's mentioning all the wags. There's just so much more about Daniel that you could have mentioned. His smile, his love for horses, his friendship with Josh Allen, his everything he's given to the sport, his presence at the Met Gala, his smile, his charm, his charisma. Like, there's just so much you could have talked about. But sure, let's talk about him being fired. Number 8, and this is where I really start to struggle, is Nico Hülkenberg, which is written here as Nicolas Hülkenberg. Affectionately nicknamed the Hulk. There was a time when Nico could have topped this list. Currently, wouldn't say he tops it. Not in his racing career, not with his face. He just looks a little aged. But fine. Objectively, he could be a handsome guy. Number 9 is Carlos. Carlos is number 9. We've gone through 9 people before we got to Carlos. I'm just saying. And I understand that Carlos might be better in motion than necessarily in still. Carlos should be it should be Charles and Carlos. Daniel. And then we can move on. Carlos should be literally topping this list. If there's one thing that Mattia Binotto knew, it's an attractive boy. Landed at Ferrari, the team he's been with since 2021. He will leave the company for Wiliams at the end of the 2024 season. The 30-year-old has already garnered 3 impressive wins in his career. When he touches down at the Las Vegas, why are we talking about the Las Vegas Grand Prix? Fans can be on the lookout for Scottish model Rebecca Donaldson in the supporting stands. She wouldn't step foot in the stands. These two have been rumored to be dating since the summer of 2023. They haven't been rumored, they are dating. She's not in the stands, she's in the garage. And he was also touched touching down at the Austin Grand Prix before he made it to the Las Vegas Grand Prix for only focusing on American races. And there's so much more to him. So much more. I can't. Number 10 is Lando Norris. I also think he could have been higher up on the list, as much as he annoys me. Objectively, very cute kid. People love him. He's very cute. At only 24 years old, Lando Norris is one of the younger competitors in the sport. Still, he's proven to be on track for an extensive career, as he's already knobbed a trophy from the Miami Grand Prix, Dutch Grand Prix, and the Singapore Grand Prix, all in 2024, which sounds great. She could have mentioned that he has his own business, that he also an avid gamer, that he speaks on mental health. So many more attractive qualities about Lando to mention here. Number 11 is Yuki Tsunoda. Hailing from Japan, Yuki is another young star on the rise. The 24-year-old Japanese native with a killer smile only entered the F1 series in 2021. He was already scooped up by the AlphaTauri, whom he raced for until last year. He joined Red Bull this year and will be with them through 2025. Not true. He joined Racing AlphaTauri, which was then renamed to RB, or VCAR, however we want to call them. He has not joined Red Bull. He will not be with Red Bull till 2025. Unfortunately for Yuki, Red Bull seems to ignore his existence. Not sure why. But I adore Yuki. Don't know why he's this high up on the list. And also, actually 11's fine. But I also don't know why this is his description. Number 12's Checo. A native of Guadalajara, Mexico, 34-year-old Sergio Perez's F1 career started with Sauber back in 2011. He then moved on to McLaren, Force India, then Racing Point, same team, before he was retained by Red Bull in 2021. Perez has 6 wins, 3 pole positions, and 39 podiums in Formula One. Why is he the only one that got all the stats? Why did no one else get stats? Number 13 is Kevin Magnussen. Number 14, Logan Sargent. Would have been fine to have on this list were he still in F1. Though Logan Sargent may be going through a bit of a trying patch right now, he was recently dropped by Wiliams, and his plans to join IndyCar may have hit a snag. His charming smile still makes him a contender on our list. But for some reason, the 5 people still in F1 did not make this list. But they are aware that Logan is not racing for F1 or Indy. At only 23 years old, the Florida native just wrapped his debut season and is sure to make a return to the track soon. Did they speak to anyone in F1? How sure are they that he's making a return to the track? I don't think he's ever stepping foot there again. Number 15, Valtteri Bottas. It takes a man with real confidence to rock a thick stash as Valtteri does, and we are here for it. From Finland, the Stake, previously Sauber, driver previously raced for Wiliams, Mercedes, as well as Alfa Romeo. What? He raced for Mercedes is the key thing we should be focusing on here, being one of the best drivers out there. Then he raced for Alfa Romeo, which became Sauber and Stake. Same thing. I'm going to put out there that they have missed several key drivers, including Guan Yu, Alex, Oscar, Esteban, that's fine, and Lance Stroll. Could have just included them and not included Logan. By the way, Franco would have been prime for this list. He's got the riz of a maniac. Moving on from this article. In Austin this week, Max gave a sports reporter a hot lap. And then when they got out, she was like, this was the best thing ever. And he's like, would you like help taking off your helmet? And then he helped her take off her helmet. And it was so wholesome. I love Max. I love Max so much. Also, Charles and Carlos were doing some video. They were in some cowboy hat shop, and Carlos put on a hat, and Charles goes, very classy, very demure, and Carlos goes, what's demure? And Charles is like, I don't know, just people are saying it. Love it. All right, some updates on the fall break. Charles's older brother Lorenzo got engaged, and if I haven't talked about the Leclerc brothers, let me talk about them now. Charles, we all know, objectively beautiful. Arthur, also very cute. Lorenzo, the only age-appropriate person for me to talk about besides Charles. So just Arthur. I can't talk about Arthur. Charles's brother, Lorenzo, looks like he is in a Luca Guadagnino movie. Like the guy who directed Call Me By Your Name. The guy who directed Call Me By Your Name, Challengers, etc., etc. He looks like he's in one of those movies. Like he's meant to be like the main character in a movie set at like an Italian villa that's like indie. That's what he looks like. He is engaged to his dentist fiance, which is amazing. He's also the manager of both Arthur and Charles. And I just love him. They're all so beautiful in their own way. What a family. What a family. Charles also turned 27 this week and posted a little dump of his presents, of his cakes, of all of his celebrations. It was very cute. Max turned 27 on September 30th. I didn't realize they were that close in age. Kevin Magnussen turned 32 on October 5th. Lots of birthdays happening in the last month. Valtteri competed in the World Gravel Cycling Championship. And when he was interviewed, he said he loved cycling because it's the first time he can be his own engine. Which is an incredible quote. I think he finished below the hundreds, but it doesn't matter. Like in his off time from his main professional athletic career, he's competing in another professional sporting event. That's wild. I love Valtteri. He's just living his best life. George Russell went to the gym with his mother, and his mother is a badass. She was lifting weights. She looked so cool. George also, this killed me. George posted a dump of his holiday with Carmen, and it looked like they were like in the Alps or something. They were somewhere in the mountains, and they were dressed very cozy in whites, like rich people in the mountains. And there's this one picture in this dump, where he's sitting in like a very European cafe where like outlooks the like cobbled street, just a walking street, no cars, but like he's under like an umbrella. He's wearing a gray scarf, a white zipped cardigan, corduroy white pants, and white cashmere gloves while he's holding a mug of tea and looking directly at the camera. And it is so funny. It is so funny. And I'm like convinced he must be taking the piss out of us now, because how is he posting all of this in full seriousness? Like, why is that being posted? It's so funny. I love George. He is memeable. I think he knows he's memeable. Actually, truly, like, I want to think that he knows what he's doing, but I genuinely think he just loved that picture, and it just kills me. It's such a funny picture to me. Linked in the show notes, but hilarious. All right, moving on. Lap 4, trackside at Austin. TBT to Daniel. So there was an Enchante pop-up. He was also supposed to get keys to the city, but obviously he didn't make it. And why should he? But the pop-up still went through, and he posted about it and was like, thanks for popping by, even though I can't be there myself. No one fucking expected him to be there. That's crazy. But it's really sad that he was about to get keys to the city. He was also on all the promo. It was just Daniel. The promo for the race was Daniel, and he just wasn't there. NFL player Micah Parsons, just like, I don't know why, but he was like there learning about F1, like asking all the dumb questions, which I actually loved. I think it was great to hear someone asking all the questions that people think and don't want to ask out loud. Like, he just asked all the questions. I don't know who he was there with, but I loved that he was willing to ask everything. He did a thing with Alex Albon, and it was really funny. Like, Alex Albon was like, we have a weight limit. Like, we have to be 160 pounds. So I'm like right at the limit. And he's like, I feel like you're over the weight limit. And Micah Parsons was like, I haven't been 160 pounds since the 4th grade, which made me laugh. And then Alex was like, our factories in England, actually a lot of the team's factories are in England, but we all live in Monaco. And he was like, but isn't that like rich people shit? And Alex was like, well, yeah, but my apartment is like this. Like, I can't even like turn around. But also we have no taxes. And Mike was like, no taxes? And he like perked right up. It was really funny. He's going to be moving there very soon. Also, side note, I always thought the Austin GP was like one of the chiller American races, but they're literally like walking out as teammates through a red carpet, getting cheered on by the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders before getting into giant monster trucks to be like driven around for the driver's parade. Did I forget that this all happened before? This feels very Las Vegas and Miami. Like, it's not full showy like they are, but it's kind of showy. I do think the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders were there before. There's also a really funny picture of Charles and Carlos with all the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, and they're all in blue, they're in red, and they just stick out. They're just like standing there like this, like the emoji of the man with his hands to his side. It was really funny. Side note, I didn't get much of the grid walk, but one of our great boxes sent me a clip of Brundle attempting to talk to Franco, as Franco literally just walked past him. And at first it felt like he maybe had headphones in, couldn't hear Brundle. Like, Brundle was like, "Oh, we haven't met yet. I'm Martin Brundle with blah, blah, blah." Franco walked literally right past him, but then like there's a zoom in and Franco's smirking. He was doing it on purpose. Like, we see the smirk on your face. That boy is cheeky AF. Okay, so the celebrities, there were plenty of celebrities at the Monza Grand Prix. We're not in Monza, at the Austin Grand Prix. There were several Olympians. There was Gordon Ramsay, there was Quavo, there was Lainey Wilson, there was Gabby Thomas, there were some Love Island stars, there was Sting, which we'll get to in a minute, and there was Nara Smith from TikTok. If anyone's on TikTok, she makes things from scratch in fancy outfits, and she's fabulous. She was there, along with her husband Lucky, but I don't care about him. Also, Mondo, the Olympic champion of is it the vault? Is that what it's called? Where he runs with the stick and then he leaps over, and he did like 6 foot for something. He like set a world record at the Olympics, and then the next week he set a new world record, beating his own world record. But he went extra viral after he ran and leaped and set the world record. He immediately ran to his girlfriend and hugged her, and the edit was set to Taylor Swift's The Alchemy, which was the theme of the Olympics, because City of Love, lots of love. They also got engaged recently, but anyway, he was there and he handed out the pole tire to Lando, so yay Mondo. There was also a clip of Paul Mescal chatting to the Ferrari boys. There was a clip of him fixing Carlos's sweatshirt, and it was very wholesome. Right, recently he came out and said there was like this rumor that he was hooking up with girls and then taking them on a walk the next morning and then just bolting away from them. And he said that it's a hilarious rumor that him and his siblings laugh about, but his mom didn't like it because she was like, my son would never do that. Except I know people that he's run away from. So like, Paul, who are you kidding? And other news, getting the American spirit going, F1 sent several F1 people to a college football game, including Kimi and Jack Doohan and Zach Brown and Lance Stroll. Now, Zach Brown and Lance Stroll totally fit in just fine. No comments. Jack Doohan, while Australian, looks like he could fit in just fine. He looked like he was really enjoying himself. Kimi Antonelli might be the most European like child I know, and like it's as European as one gets, and he looked lost and enamored and confused and excited all at the same time, and it was actually hilarious. Of all the people that I would ever envision at a college football game, not Kimi Antonelli. So I think it was hilarious to send him there. They should have sent him there with George Russell, because I feel like that's also like epitome of Britishness. And seeing both of these people at a very American experience makes me laugh. Also, speaking of Kimi Antonelli, he did an interview recently where he said his favorite F1 drivers are Ayrton Senna and Pierre Gasly, which literally killed me. Anyway, that concludes our digital warm-up. On to the race ride. Welcome to Austin for the US Grand Prix. After a random month off, I guess. Yippee. A few things have changed, so please take note. Most importantly, Red Bull dumped Daniel on the side of the road. In comes Liam Lawson, fresh as a New Zealand daisy, and immediately is tangled up in some sort of beef with Fernando because these old guys be crazy. In an unexpected turn of events, we get a blast from the past. Max wins the sprint race. TBT when Red Bull was fast. Despite Red Bull not sucking today, it's Lando who secures pole position, though it'll be hard for him to stay in first, even in perfect conditions. When the lights go out on Sunday, Max goes full send down the inside. He overtakes Lando, but just stays within the limits, so no punishment for going wide. And who is there to take advantage of these drivers battling it out? Only Charles Leclerc, who shoots forward from P4 to P1 in a move that made us all twist and shout. The whole race be crazy with the FIA dishing out penalties galore. Some of them made sense, while others caused certain drivers, George, to go into a squeaky uproar. What? However, the real drama came in a multi-lap battle with Lando and Max. And when Lando finally overtook Max, he went so far off track and just didn't give the spot back. Some say Max pushed Lando wide, but neither me or the FIA agree. The result is a 5-second penalty for Lando, which secured Max P3. Charles put on a stunning show from start to finish as he maintained his staggering lead. And he and Carlos secured P1 and P2 with that F1 type Ferrari 6-gear speed. Next up, we're going to Mexico City. Fingers crossed for another race that will leave us all giddy. All right, on to analysis, kicking things off with the sprint. So the beef between Fernando and Liam Lawson is like low-key hilarious. At some point, Fernando overtook Liam, but Liam did like a switcheroo and overtook Fernando back and ended up squeezing Fernando a bit, which really pissed Fernando off. Fernando got on the radio and said that AlphaTauri is an idiot. And then after the race, he found Liam and they were caught in a very heated exchange where he's I don't know what he's saying, but he's yelling at Liam. And then in his interviews, he says that Liam clearly has something to prove in the 6 races he has. He just doesn't think this is the way to prove it, but it's not his own career at stake, so it's not up to him. It was ridiculous. After the race, the actual race, Liam was asked about about his opinion on the situation. He was just the vision of diplomacy. He gave such a great answer about how he didn't realize it was that deep on track and that he clearly didn't do anything wrong. Otherwise, he would have gotten a penalty. But he has utmost respect for Fernando so much as a driver and that there's so much he can learn from him. And he looks forward to continue learning from Fernando. And he hopes that they can move past this. And just he was kind of giggling awkwardly as he said it. It's just very commendable that he's able to exhibit this kind of diplomacy. But Fernando needs to chill. He's 20 years old. Relax. Also, Carlos had some incredible overtakes in the sprint race. He overtook Charles and then he overtook George. Actually, Charles and Carlos overtook George in one go, so it was a little bad for George. But then Carlos went on to battle with Lando, and Lando ended up walking up from panicking because Lando panics. And there was so much smoke, but then Carlos literally overtook him so smoothly, and it was just a great move. And I just love seeing Carlos Carlos at his prime. He's just so good. He was on form this whole weekend. But the sprint race was won by Max, which was so exciting. He got pole position for the sprint race and he won the sprint race. And it's just it's probably good for him to win again. It's a good reassurance. He was also given the prize for the sprint race by Sting. And he was asked later if he knew who Sting was. And he said he did in fact know who Sting was. And then he was asked if he thinks Sting knew who he was. And he said, well, it's all over my tracksuit. So probably. So I lolled. On to quali, which took place on the same day. George had a situation where he ended up spinning a bunch and rammed into the wall and it caused the yellow flag to go out, and it was right at the end of Q3, so it brought an end the session, basically. Someone said, it was like a comment on TikTok, that like the spirit of Logan Sargent possessed George's body, but it also sounds like the spirit of Williams possessed Mercedes' body, because Mercedes said they didn't have enough parts to fix George's car, which is a very reminiscent of Logan Sargent's time at Williams. Clearly they had more money than they let on, though, because George did pretty well during the race, but we'll get to that in a moment. There were 3 penalties issued throughout the sprint race. Liam Lawson ended up starting on the back of the grid because he used multiple additional power unit elements. I believe it was like a 60-place grid penalty, but this was sort of inherited from Daniel, I think. Joe was penalized 5 positions for additional power unit elements. And then Oscar also received a penalty for exceeding track limits or for pushing someone off track, something along those lines. And it was whatever it was, whichever one it was, because for some reason they like mesh in my mind. Whichever one of those it was not warranted because he didn't do either of those things. Also important to note, Mondo from the Olympics, the world record holder in the vault, I think that's what it's called, where he has a stick and he pole vault. It might be called the pole vault, where he has a stick and he jumps over like over 6 feet. He like keeps beating his own world record. Anyway, he gave the Pirelli tire to Lando. So the starting grid is as follows: Lando, Max, Carlos, Charles, Oscar, George, but George is starting from the pit lane, even though he qualified 6th. Followed by Pierre, Alonso, Kevin, Checo, Yuki, Nico, Esteban, Stroll, Albon, Franco, Bottas, Lewis, Joe, and Lawson. Starting grid. Moving on to the race. So we're going to kick things off with Ferrari, even though that's like saving the best for last, but I'm saving the best for first, I guess. First, Carlos had just like the best weekend in general. He was incredible in the sprint and also put on quite a show during the race with his race with Max throughout the first like 30-ish laps. He ended up overtaking Max on track due to undercutting him with a pit stop. But the battle that took place between them, where he really like tried to overtake him, was quite impressive from both sides, from Carlos with his maneuvers and with Max from defending. So Charles basically, the start for Charles won him the race. Basically, he went from 4th to 1st before the first turn was even finished, and he zoomed right the fuck by everyone and maintained his lead for the rest of the race. He led the whole race. Lando did actually have a very good start, but Max went in to attack him, which everyone, I think, besides Lando, seemed to have anticipated. And the corner was just so wide that it was so easy for Charles to just zoom past everyone battling each other. He was just like, bye! And just like, there was just gap. And like, but the Red Sea opened up for Charles, and through the Ferrari went. And he did, like, besides that move, which was actually phenomenal, he also had to maintain the lead. He had to manage his team to ensure that they kept his strategy accurate and intact and, like, didn't mess it up, which is very likely for Ferrari. But he did all of that, and he did a phenomenal job, and he stayed P1 past the first turn, and he kept it, and I think he finished with like an 8-second lead over his own teammate. And when he won, his engineer went, "That's my boy." But positively, because that quote just really reminds me of Harry Potter Goblet of Fire when Cedric Diggory's dad goes, "That's my boy." But he's not dead. He just won the Grand Prix. All right, moving on to Max versus Lando. So their first incident at the very start, when Max and Lando found themselves face to face at the start of the race. The thing is, everyone sort of figured that Max was going to launch super hard down the inside. Unfortunately, it seemed that everyone figured that out besides Lando. Literally after the race, Charles literally said that he knew he'd have a chance because I'm very familiar with how Max races, and I know he'd go full send on the start, which Max did. And everyone said there was literally no question in our minds that Max was going to go down the inside as soon as the lights went out. Except Lando, who was like, what's going on? Also, Max, very impressively, knows the rules very, very well.
He also knows that the stewards are much more lenient for the first turn of the first lap. So he's always going to go very aggressive in the first lap at the start, because he knows that the stewards are going to probably turn a relatively blind eye, as they usually do for anything that happens at the start, because it's so chaotic, and the stewards are like, look, it's the start. Unless something like aggressive happens, like they're generally like, they let it slide. So despite what you might think about him being off track or about him pushing Lando off track, it actually doesn't matter, because first turn of the first lap really is usually ignored unless you cause like a massive collision, which he did not. And then there's the end of the race. So like around lap 45-ish, Lando is catching up to Max, and he spends the next like 10-ish laps attempting to overtake Max. And he gets very, very close to overtaking Max. They're wheel to wheel for like half of each lap. But Max is just exceptional at defending. And another thing is, on the post-race show, Will Buxton and the post-race show team rightfully point out that Lando needs to learn from his mistakes, and he continuously makes the same mistakes against Max, and it just doesn't make sense why he can't learn from them. And every move Max does is not like new. Max is very, very good, and he's also very, very consistent. There's two things that Will and the team point out that Max is exceptional at, and is that one, Max knows the rules very, very, very well. He knows how the stews generally tend to act. He also has an exceptional spatial awareness of his own car. So like when I look at an F1 car and when we see the view from the cockpit, I feel like I'd have no idea where the rest of the car is. Max seems to know exactly where his car is located, and he seems to be able to stay within track limits to the very, very edge. He continuously pushes the rules to the very limit. He occasionally does cross the limit. He does overdo it, but it's so rare because he has such incredible control of himself, of his car, and awareness of how the FIA might rule, awareness of the rules, and awareness of his competitors and how they compete. He has figured Lando out. Lando won't figure Max out back. And that's one issue. I don't really want to take away from the fact that Lando actually raced very well. He was very hard on himself after. He didn't race well enough, but he did race exceptionally well. His biggest flaw, I think, was his team telling him that he actually was ahead on the apex than Max, which he was not. Anyway, so he was not actually ahead on the apex. I don't know why his team told him he was ahead on the apex. He was not ahead on the apex. Max was ahead. So after it all happens and he overtakes Max, he's clearly gone severely off track. McLaren tells Lando that he's actually ahead on the apex, so he has the right to be ahead and he doesn't have to give the spot back. I think they were really banking on Max getting a penalty for pushing Lando off track. Max didn't push Lando off track because he stayed on track. Technically, very closely, but he did stay on track. Lando went severely off track, so he did gain an advantage by going off track, which is not allowed. His team should have told him that he would be getting a penalty for that because he was not ahead on the apex. He did not have control over the situation. He should have given the spot back and then attempted to overtake again. When the penalty was issued, Lando's first reaction is like, well, why didn't we just give the spot back? For some reason, I feel like Max is Lando's Achilles heel, and like he's an exceptional racer if he was racing against anyone and everyone besides Max Verstappen. And I don't think it's because they're friends. I think it's because Max is a very aggressive competitor. And I think there's a certain amount of people on track who are able to go up against Max. I think it is Charles. I think it is Carlos. I think it is Lewis. And I think that's about it. I think pretty much no one else has the mental fortitude, the ability to go up against Max Verstappen, because Max will always push everything to the very limit, legally within the rules, but he will always push things to the very limit. And he, as Will and the post-race team said, has an exceptional control over his car, over himself, and over and an expert knowledge of the rules. So he knows how to bend the rules, sort of like rich people with taxes. He knows what to do to get what he needs, and it's highly, highly impressive. Will Buxton literally said Max should not have been on the podium today. Lando should have been on the podium today. And the only reason Max is on the podium today is not because of his car. It's not because of his strategy. It's because of Max. Because Max is such a good driver. And he has such control over every aspect of the situation. That's why he was on the podium. Other highlights, Franco Colapinto did exceptional. He had such a good race. There was I didn't fully understand what was going on, but he did give an interview after. He didn't get the fastest lap. He kept setting fastest laps, but ended up going to Esteban, I think. And I think he was doing an interview in the media pen in Spanish. In Spanish. And he was saying the Frenchman doesn't care about the environment. Why do they change tires to get the fastest lap? If I don't get a seat next year in F1, maybe I should try out for strategy because I'm really good at it. It was actually quite funny. Every interview he does is pretty funny. But he had a great race. He did so well to continuously get points to outscore his teammate. Very impressive. Liam Lawson, also first race it's not his first race, but it's his first race officially driving for V-Carb, and he did really, really well. I also want to point out, Oscar said in his post-race interview that he didn't have enough pace to do anything up front, and he also just had barely enough pace to keep everyone behind, and that was pretty much it. That was the description of his race. All right, moving on to Mercedes. So tragically, Lewis was not having a good weekend just in general, and was literally starting the race in P18. When he did, he actually commented on the radio, "Wow, this is far back," which is a little dramatic because he's definitely started at the back of the grid before, so I don't know why he was being so ridiculous. But he ended up in lap 5 having an accident that was coincidentally in the exact same spot at where George crashed during qualifying, and George had a very, very aggressive crash during qualifying. He spun 4 times and rammed into the wall, and there was a whole thing because the team was we don't have enough parts to fix it with the upgrades, and it was and he was well, this is just what I have to live with. And then he was Lewis offered me his car, and I was no. And someone in the comments was that's because he knows they fucked with Lewis's upgrades. Whatever the situation is, George had a shittier car than Lewis, and really the fact that they both spun out, Lewis only ended up in the gravel. He didn't end up crashing in the wall, but the fact that they spun out in the exact same spot indicates that it might be a car-related issue, because if they both lose it in the rear in the same spot, that's definitely an issue with the car and not with the drivers. And for Lewis to make a mistake like that is so rare. There's definitely, it's definitely car specific, I think. And then it caused a safety car. No one pitted during the safety car, so it's actually a really boring and useless safety car. But it also, seems to have been the first safety car since the Canadian Grand Prix, which is crazy. That's such a long time to go without a safety car. I don't think in my time in F1, I don't remember going that long without a safety car. Moving on to George, he had a great race. He started from the pit lane because of the crash. He came out at the back of the grid. He served the 5-second penalty for unknown reasons. And he still finished P6 ahead of Checo. And even though the car, everyone said that Max outperformed his car, the car was still fine. Checo could have outperformed George, but he did not. George fought his way up to P6, and that is highly, highly impressive. So all the penalties that we had this race was, first, Lando received the 5-second penalty for leaving the track and getting an advantage, and that was at the end of the race. George received a 5-second penalty for leaving the track and getting an advantage, or pushing Valtteri off track. It's one or the other, over Valtteri. And Yuki received a 5-second penalty for forcing another driver off track. The debate is whether Max should have received a penalty both for his behavior in the start with Lando and in their battle towards the end of the race. I don't think he did. I think he kept it legal. I think the FIA ruled correctly on that one. I do think the FIA entirely fucked up on George's ruling. And I think they also did a similar thing for Oscar in the sprint. And I think it was entirely unnecessary. In fact, all of the drivers defended Oscar, being like, that shouldn't have happened. I don't know why he got it. But like, Oscar used his penalty as an example for why Max should have gotten it, whereas all the other drivers were like, Max didn't get the penalty, which is an example of why Oscar shouldn't have gotten the penalty, which I think is the correct argument. But obviously Oscar is going to fight for his teammate. By the way, he also did help Lando retain P4 because when he got the 5-second penalty, they asked Oscar to hold back just enough so that Lando being 5 seconds behind wouldn't put him behind Oscar and would put him just behind Carlos, so in P4. And Oscar did, and as soon as he was behind just the right amount of time, went on the radio and said, stop. That's exactly the right pace. Do not change. And Oscar did it because, you know, his race wasn't in contention. Like, it wasn't like affecting his standings or anything. Like, it made sense. And there was like a whole thing about like him saying like, I'm happy to follow team orders if they make sense for me. And this was a situation where it did make sense, where it wasn't impacting his standings, his race or anything for him to help Lando out. Max also did come out saying that he doesn't think Oscar is a D2 driver and that he thinks Oscar shouldn't fall victim to that, and he doesn't think Oscar ever would. Which again, we're fighting like a cold war with words, but Max is right. All right, moving on to radios. There were some great radios this race. Let's kick things off so around lap 39, Kevin got a very frantic message saying, you must box right now. But like, it was still so calm. Like, they were frantic, but they were calm. They were like, you must box right now. And like this like European accent. And then he boxes very calmly and they change things and clearly something's wrong. But like, it's situations like these that inspire the name of this podcast, because like, wheels are flying off, the car is on fire, and the radio message is like, box, please box right now. Please immediately come into the pit lane. We must box. It makes me giggle. The other message that came through was Oscar was asked, what are your thoughts on plan A? And his response was ambitious. There was a very similar perception of plan A across the grid. No one wanted to do their plan A. Everyone was very into plan B or plan C, but I enjoyed Oscar saying plan A stood for ambitious. Then George, I actually don't know what this was referencing, but what the engineer did. But George told his engineer, for that, dinner is on me tonight. And the engineer went, ooh. And George goes, it's only dinner, calm down. Maybe giggle. And then when George got his penalty against Valtteri Bottas, they told him you got a 5-second penalty for forcing Valtteri off track. And his response was like such a high-pitched, What? It was hilarious. It was like the most George radio ever. And then Toto got on the radio and was like, these penalties are total joke, George. Total joke, George. Was that a German accent? A joke and George sound very similar in German accent to me. Also, Carlos got on the radio and told his engineer that his car smelled like fuel. And the engineer's response was like, we'll get back to you, which is an insane thing to say when an F1 driver's open cockpit smells like fuel. They did resolve it in the end, but insane thing to say, like not calming at all. Also, Carlos received instructions from engineer that were like, more phase 1, brake release for turn 1. And Carlos responded, I don't know what that means. And it was really funny because the commentators were like, well, I thought I knew what that meant. But if Carlos doesn't know what it meant, then I probably don't know what that message meant. I just think it's funny. Ferrari is getting better, but their communication is still subpar. Moving on to post-race. I love that when they got out of the car and they're like at their little stands taking off their helmets and drinking their water. Max comes in, congratulates Charles, and Charles is like, oh my god, thank you so much. And Max immediately launches into an explanation of what happened between him and Lando, and Charles gets super serious, and you can tell he's listening to something very important, and he's like trying to be supportive, and it was just really funny. Also, I think it was really funny that Max gave his P3 interview, and next was supposed to be Carlos and then Charles. There was just like this 5-minute gap because Carlos and Charles were taking group pictures with the Ferrari team. They were like watching them take selfies and like group pictures and everything. Charles ended up taking an extra selfie with the team while Carlos ran off to do his interview, but it was pretty funny. In the cool down room, I would just like to say the Max Verstappen podcast is back, but I would also like to say that the greatest, I feel like, guest he can have on his podcast is Carlos Sainz, because Max loves to yap and explain things, and Carlos loves analysis. Like, I feel like he's just an analysis king, and I feel like he's the only one who will fully give in to Max's need to decipher, dissect, and discuss everything that happened on track. And literally they're sitting down. Charles isn't there yet, and they're watching the screen, and Carlos is like, what did he get you? And Max is like, turn 12. And then it sounded like Max had the wrong information, because he said that Lando's penalty was for track limits, because he said Lando got like 3 warnings and then he was off track, so that's why he got the penalty. That's not why he got the penalty. And then they're continuing to watch, and then Max goes, Carlos, in like lap whatever, was it you who hit the curb and caused all of that, or was it something else? And Carlos goes, I believe it was a gust of wind. And then they're continuing to watch, and then the battle between Max and Lando comes on, and Carlos goes, is this the battle? And Max goes, yes, so for 3 laps, this is the battle. And then Charles was in there, and they're all chatting, and Carlos is like, I destroyed my mediums behind Max. And Max was like, you did indeed. And I just love that this was their entire conversation. Like, Carlos gives Max everything he needs, and it also fulfills his need to decipher and discuss and analyze every moment of the race. And I think they're such a great pair for commentary and discussion and analysis, and I feel like it should be utilized more. I feel like they might not get along, or they might just not have a lot in common for literally everything else, but like in terms of their perception and analysis of F1, I feel like they would really bond. And I just feel like they really have this common ground about how they view and want to understand F1 that they would really bond over. No one else wants to discuss F1 and the race the way Max wants to, the way that Carlos does. That's what I think. The other thing that happened, so they're on the podium, and they start getting their trophies, and both Max and Carlos get a tire, and their look of literal confusion is so funny to me, because they're like, why the fuck am I holding this tire? And then Charles got like a stick trophy, like a whole metal thing. What happened was that they had like these teddy bear trophies that they had planned, but apparently they suddenly realized right before the podium that it was like, it might be a copyright infringement, so they couldn't use the teddy bear trophies, so they had to like scramble and find like alternatives, which is why Carlos and Max got like tires. Like, they literally got like qualifying trophies, and then like pole sitting trophies, and then Charles, I guess, got a leftover from another year. I don't really know what happened. It was really weird. Carlos and Max looked extremely confused. There was a clip of Carlos literally losing his wheel as it rolled across the podium. It was very funny. All right, so the results are driver of the day. Charles won driver of the day, and it's so well deserved. He should be driver of the day, but I still have a few honorable mentions that I want to go through. Carlos, I think, was just an MVP of the entire weekend. What a great driving from him, from sprint quality to sprint to qualifying to the race. Like, just had some great moves, and like, he's just balls to the walls now. He has nothing to lose. I think Max maximizing his car for all it's worth is super commendable. I also think that George driving from P20 to P6 is so impressive, and penalty aside, because he didn't deserve that, I think he just needs to have a shout out also for his radio message. What? So high pitched. It was so funny. I also think our 2-season add-ons deserve like major shout outs. Like, you know, we often get overexcited about certain drivers coming in, doing well, and thinking just like dumping them into F1 and like hoping for the best, but then they fail, and it's like Nick DeVries, for example. However, Franco has had several races now in F1 and done immensely well in all of them. Some of them were some of the hardest races on the calendar, including Singapore and Baku, but he thrived, and he outperformed Alex Albon today, which is very impressive. And the fact that he doesn't have a seat next year is insane. He's got the Riz, he's got the sass, he's got talent. Get him in a seat immediately. I know there's one seat left, but like get him in there. And then Liam Lawson also drove like a champ this weekend, and he came into a very stressful situation, replacing a fan favorite and a grid favorite. And he's already gotten himself into extra drama with Fernando Alonso, who was like on one this weekend when it came to Liam Lawson. But honestly, I think he really embodied the spirit of F1, like good racing and drama. He really brought it all to the table this weekend, and I really appreciate it. And I hope both Liam and Franco find their way to the grid next year. Dick in the box. I kind of want to say Lando, even though he's not like really a dick in the box, but like he's also like not a dick in the box. I think the way he approaches racing Max is kind of strange. Like it like really seems to be his Achilles heel, and he must know the way Max is going to act, and I just don't know why his actions on track don't counteract the way we all know Max is going to act. Max is not subtle. Max is not surprising. Max is very consistent and very good. So like we see other drivers on track like reacting to the experiences they have and improving. Why is Lando not able to improve against Max? And then, yeah, McLaren complains about everything these days, which is common for people in their situation, because that's when you can't fight the battle on track, you fight it in the stews room. So I commend it, but at the same time, I know Lando is able to battle Max. He's just for some reason not doing it. But I really think the dick in the box this week was the FIA, who seemed to be kind of random and inconsistent with their penalties. Like Oscar and George didn't deserve their penalties. Oscar during the sprint, George during the race. They were, in Toto's words, a total joke, George. A total joke. And I understand applying these rules can get very nuanced, and like that's like why we ran into this issue with Lando and Max and why it's so divisive across the fan base. And it stems from the fact, I think, that the FIA's rulings are relatively inconsistent, so it's hard to track what they will rule and what they won't rule. But in this case, I think it's very clear once you watch the slow-mo reenactment that Max was within track limits and he followed the rules to a T. But at the same time, I think the FIA can do better in how they set the precedent and the rulings they apply to every situation to make sure that the drivers know what to expect and how to act in every situation. All right, so the final results of the Austin Grand Prix are Charles, Carlos, Max, Lando, Oscar, George, Checo, Nico, Liam, Franco, Kevin, Gasly, Alonso, Yuki, Stroll, Albon, Valtteri, Ocon, and Guan Yu Zhou. And Lewis DNF'd in 20th. The standings are as following. And usually I do the top 10, but today I'm going to do the top 20 because I actually think it's fascinating. So Max has 354 points. Lando has 297. Charles has 275. So he actually could overtake Lando over the next few races if he's consistent. Oscar has 247. Carlos has 215. Lewis has 177. George has 167. Checo has 150. And then we drop past 100. Alonso has 62. Nico has 29. Stroll has 24. Yuki has 22. Alex has 12. Daniel has 12. Kevin has 8. Pierre has 8. Ollie Bierman has 7. Franco has 5. Esteban has 5. Liam has 2. And Joe, Logan, and Valtteri have 0. I would just like to point out how impressive it is that both Ollie Bierman and Franco have more points than Esteban Ocon. I also think that it's impressive that Liam Lawson has 2 points already after one race, and has more than all three of Joe, Guan Yu, Logan, and Valtteri. Logan obviously doesn't count because he's out, but you know. I also think that it's funny that the Drivers' Championship is between 23 drivers and not 20. The Constructors' Championship is as follows. McLaren with 544, Red Bull with 504, Ferrari with 496, Mercedes with 344, Aston Martin with 86, Haas with 38, RB, Honda, V-Carb with 36, Williams with 17, Alpine with 13, and Kick Sauber with 0. All right. So that's it for the US Grand Prix. Next up, we're headed to Mexico City in just a few days' time. As always, make sure to subscribe, review, share with any potential boxes, and make sure you reach out with any thoughts, questions, topics to request, or just to share some content that I probably have missed. Like today, when I missed the fact that Franco just full on ignored Brundle on the grid walk, which is hilarious, and I would have missed that otherwise. Anyway, don't forget to follow at BoxBoxF1 on TikTok and Instagram to keep up between races. Reach out if you have any thoughts, questions, or opinions, and I'll see you soon. See you next week. BoxBox.